What happens when a brilliant African king builds one of the most feared warrior nations in history and dares to challenge the mighty British Empire? Welcome to the world of Shaka Zulu, military mastermind, ruthless reformer, and the founder of a kingdom that forever changed the landscape of southern Africa. In today's video, we dive deep into the origins of the Zulu Kingdom, explore its sophisticated military structure, and unpack the explosive events of the Anglo-Zulu War, where traditional spears and shields clashed with Victorian rifles and cannons. Forget what you think you know about colonial wars. This is the real story. Gritty, tactical, and full of unexpected turns. If you're a history buff hungry for immersive stories that go beyond the Eurocentric lens, you're in the right place. Hit that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more epic historical deep dives. Now, let's meet the king who dared to defy an empire. Origins of a warrior king. To understand how the Zulu Kingdom became a military powerhouse, we must start with its architect, Shaka Zulu. Born in 1787 out of wedlock to a Zulu chief and a woman from the Langeni clan, Shaka's early life was marked by hardship and exile. But from these humble beginnings rose a leader who would unite disparate clans into a fearsome and organized kingdom. Shaka ascended to power around 1816 after the death of his father, Senzangakona. At the time, the Zulu were just one of many small Nguni-speaking clans in southeastern Africa. But under Shaka's leadership, this would change rapidly. He introduced revolutionary military reforms. He replaced the traditional throwing spear with the deadly Ikilwa, a short stabbing spear that encouraged close-quarters combat. He organized his warriors, called impi, into disciplined regiments based on age and loyalty. Every warrior lived, trained, and marched together in a barracks-like system. But most crucially, Shaka introduced the bullhorn formation, a tactical masterpiece. The main force, or chest, would engage the enemy head-on. Flanking units, the horns, would encircle the enemy, while a reserve force, the loins, would wait behind to reinforce or exploit weaknesses. This was not just war. It was psychological domination. Entire tribes surrendered at the mere sight of the approaching impi. Within a decade, Shaka's forces had subdued and absorbed dozens of neighboring groups, establishing the mighty Zulu Kingdom. Rise of the Zulu Kingdom. By the 1820s, Shaka's Zulu Kingdom controlled a vast stretch of territory in what is now KwaZulu-Natal. It was a centralized state with an efficient military at its core. Every male subject was expected to serve in the army. Training was brutal. Warriors marched barefoot for miles, honed their reflexes in mock battles, and underwent rigorous tests of endurance and discipline. But Shaka wasn't just a brute. He was an innovator. He transformed warfare into a science, emphasizing mobility, deception, and overwhelming force. His regiments were highly mobile, often covering up to 50 miles a day. Ambushes and feints were commonplace. Cattle were not just wealth, they were logistics. They fed the army, rewarded valor, and supported the kingdom's economy. At its height, the Zulu Kingdom was not just a military machine. It was a cultural and political juggernaut, respected and feared by all who bordered it. Shaka's reign, however, ended in betrayal. In 1828, he was assassinated by his half-brothers, Dingane and Mlangana. But the military state he built lived on, evolving, adapting, and eventually clashing with the greatest colonial force of the 19th century, the British Empire. The road to war. Fast forward to the 1870s. By now, Britain had extended its reach across southern Africa. They wanted gold, diamonds, and control. But one kingdom stood in their way, the Zulus. At the time, the Zulu king was Cetshwayo Kampande, Shaka's nephew and a military leader in his own right. Under his rule, the Zulu Kingdom remained fiercely independent, with a standing army estimated at over 40,000 warriors. The British, led by Sir Henry Bartle Frere, viewed this powerful Black Kingdom as a threat. In 1878, they issued an ultimatum to Cetshwayo, demanding he disband his military and accept British protection. The terms were impossible and designed to provoke war. Cetshwayo refused. He prepared for battle. On January 11, 1879, the British invaded Zululand, initiating the Anglo-Zulu War, the Battle of Isandlwana. What happened next stunned the world. On January 22, 1879, around 20,000 Zulu warriors descended upon a British encampment at Isandlwana. The British, underestimating the Zulus, had split their forces and failed to properly fortify their position. It was a perfect setup for Shaka's old tactics. Using the bullhorn formation, the Zulu attacked. The chest hit the front, while the horns encircled the flanks. The loins surged in once the British lines began to falter. The British fired with Martini Henry rifles and even had artillery, but they were overwhelmed by Zulu numbers, maneuverability, and sheer ferocity. The result? Over 1,300 British soldiers killed in one afternoon. It was the worst defeat ever inflicted by a native army on a modern Western force. The Zulus had won, but at a cost. Their victory, while momentous, enraged the British public and Parliament. The Empire was humiliated. Retaliation would be swift and brutal. Rorke's Drift and the Turning Tide. Later that very day, another battle was fought at Rorke's Drift, a mission station defended by just over 150 British and colonial troops. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the defenders held off repeated Zulu assaults. They had superior firepower, barricades, and perhaps a stroke of luck. 11 Victoria Crosses were awarded to the British defenders, and the battle became legendary in British military history. But make no mistake, while Rorke's Drift was a symbolic win for Britain, Isandlwana had already shaken the foundations of colonial confidence. The tide began to turn when British reinforcements arrived. Equipped with more men, better logistics, and a thirst for vengeance, the British launched a full-scale invasion of Zulu land, the fall of the Zulu Kingdom. In March 1879, the British returned with overwhelming force. They scorched the land, disrupted supply lines, and engaged the Zulus in a series of battles. Still, the Zulu fought valiantly, using every ounce of the strategic brilliance Shaka had instilled. Guerrilla tactics, feints, ambushes. The Zulu arsenal was deep, but they were now fighting a war of attrition against a modern industrial army. The final blow came at the Battle of Ulundi on July 4, 1879. The British formed a massive square formation, bayonets outward, machine guns and artillery at the corners. The Zulus charged bravely but were cut down by withering fire. Ulundi fell. Cetshwayo was captured. The Zulu Kingdom was dismantled, divided into 13 sub-kingdoms to prevent any future unified resistance. It was the end of an era. Legacy of Shaka and the Zulu. Though the Zulu Kingdom was conquered, its legacy endures. Shaka Zulu remains one of Africa's most iconic figures, a military genius whose reforms rival those of Napoleon or Alexander the Great. His bullhorn formation is still studied in military academies worldwide. Cetshwayo, too, is remembered, not just as a warrior king but as a symbol of resistance against imperial domination. The Anglo-Zulu War forced the British Empire to reckon with the reality that indigenous resistance was no joke. The Zulu had shattered the illusion of European invincibility. In modern South Africa, Zulu identity remains strong. Their language, culture, and pride have survived centuries of colonization, apartheid, and modern politics. Statues of Shaka stand tall across the country. His legacy isn't just in the battles he won, but in the spirit he awakened. The story of Shaka Zulu and the Anglo-Zulu War isn't just about shields versus rifles. It's about courage, strategy, and the fight for sovereignty. It's about how a king with no army built a nation of warriors, how his successors took on one of the greatest empires in history, and nearly won. and how the echo of Zulu war cries still rings through the hills of KwaZulu-Natal. History is not just written by the victors. Sometimes it's carved in the grit of those who dared to resist. If this story challenged what you thought you knew about colonial history, give it a like. Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments. We'd love to hear from fellow history buffs. And don't forget to subscribe for more immersive, epic tales from the past. Because the stories they didn't teach you in school, those are the ones worth telling.